So before start that, any questions on yesterday last two classes? Anything you want to know more? Are we good? Okay, no problem. Good. If any questions, just ask me anytime. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll do today's after maybe. Okay, but I think you'll get the email today after this class. Maybe tomorrow by tomorrow morning. Maybe tomorrow you'll get that account. Okay, you'll get the email and all the details. I'll I'll send separate email. So even though if you go through the recording, there you can have all the details how you can access the software through on an internet. Okay, I think you can go to better to go to the recording first for class one. There you can get the idea on that. So we already recorded that particular thing. And also I'll share the document also. Okay. So yesterday we discussed about how to read the data if the data is written in the column input format. Okay, so if the data is like this and by using the data step we can create the data. So we had defined like this, and but after that we just created the data set. Now let's look at what exactly is happening in the back end. When you submit the program here, when you submit this particular program, so let's see what will happen in the back end. The data step is processed in two phases. Once you submit the program, it will be processed in two different phases in the back end. So these things you cannot see here in the front end, but it's processed in the back end whenever it uses a temporary space in processing. So the first phase is compilation phase, and the next one is execution phase. Okay. So let's see what exactly happened in the compilation phase. So when it compilation phase, SAS creates an input buffer. What exactly it nothing but an input buffer will be created. So what is exactly input buffer means? It holds the current SAS raw data record, current raw data file record. Okay, so that is being processed. So first thing before that, so you need to know that like whenever you're creating the data set, the data will be processed record by record, nothing but row by row. One row first it will process and create the data and will go to the next row. Like that, you have n number of rows are there that will be processed n number of times. And it means the row wise processing only, not like completely it will take a complete data and load into the system. It will process one by one. Each and every record will be checked as per the syntax that you defined in the program. So first thing is input buffer. Whatever the raw data file that you have in the file, that will be stored in the input buffer in the back end. Okay, so in this backend it will be stored only raw data, so it's not like anything. So it's whatever the data that you have filed, it will be stored in the raw input buffer. In the input buffer, each and every character, even though if you have spaces, each and every character including space will also be allocated one block, like one particular number, 1 2 3 4, like that will be, these numbers will be allocated created in the back end, but you cannot see those. It means this will be identify the position of the particular character. So that's the reason you can see this. Once the data is stored in the input buffer, once each and every character is stored in each separate box, yeah, then it will move to the program data vector. A program vector to hold the current SAS observation. When it will be created, PDB, once the data is stored in input buffer, when you're reading the data by using the input buffer, inputs file, that particular file will be divided like 1 to 3. means you are asking to create a flight number 1, 2, 3, one from first position to third position. It means it will take the three positions, whatever that defined that you in the input statement, that will be come here. As per the input buffer, as per the input statement, the PDV will be created for each and every variable. So what will happen is whatever the data that you have in your input buffer, that will be divided as per your definition in the input statement. So once you define each and everything, then the description portion means the data will be written into the file. Once you return the file, it will be divided like each and every column. It will be like its character and numerical. All the information will be stored in the back at the table level. So two things you have to remember: that what is mean by input buffer, what is mean by PDV program data vector. So let's see that whenever you are doing the compilation here, first it will take the raw data file, the input buffer, in the input statement, whatever you define, that will be allocated in the PDV. When you see the run button, it will be do that. Now, once you execute the statement, run statement, then it start executing this program. So before that, if any errors are there in the program, if any errors in the input statement or in file statement, will be thrown away in there in the log file. It won't go to the execution phase. Okay, so it means first it will be the compilation. If the compilation success, it will go to the execution phase. Okay, in the execution phase, what will happen is, see, first input the raw data. The first record will come to the input buffer. From that particular input buffer, the data will be divided as per the PDV. Like this, all the data will be divided, and then we'll return the data to the statement once you see that. Like that, it will be processed each and every record. Is that clear? So like this, each and every record will be processed and created in this as data set. If any issues in the data, if any so whenever you're executing the program, if any issues in the data, then you'll see the missing or blank or thrown errors. Some less like extra records, extra data, those will not be written. So links, everything will be need to be properly written the code. If anything is there, it will throw an error in the log file. You have to understand that. So like this, it will be to the all the records. So this is about the flowchart, like how the execution will be happen here. Yeah. So any questions in these steps in the compilation execution? Because mostly you will get the one question like what is meant by PDV, what is meant by input buffer. Those two questions whenever somebody will ask that if you are going to the 1 or 2 years experience. So any questions, we'll go to the, I'll move to the next. Okay, good. Yeah, now just we see the accessing the lib name statement, right? 1 minute, please. Yeah, I'm sorry for that. Yeah. Yeah, so this is about the library's name and how you can store the data in the temporarily, how you can store the data permanently. So let's go to here. So this is about when you execute the program, the data will be stored in the temporarily in the work location. To save the data in permanently, you have to use the library. What are the library that you created? That library you have to use it like temp dot. So if you specify like this is a library name dot table name. So this is how you can define about the to save the data set permanently. See temporary. So if you go to temporary, in that you can see the flight. So once you save the data set here, that also appear in the here. See immediately that will be reflected in your permanent that the library that you have the folder that you allocate that you used as a library. That data will be stored in that location automatically. So once the data is stored here, it means it will be permanently saved until and unless if you delete it, it will not be deleted somewhere. But if you use the work location, this will be deleted after you once you close the SAS session. Once you close the SAS, automatically everything will be deleted. Okay, so that's what here it's finding. Yeah. So before that, so so what is the description portion? So here the description portion we just saw that, right? So the description portion nothing but a detailed information about the data set. Nothing but simply properties. If you do the properties, then you will get to know that. How will you so by so what exact? Yes, so you have to use only the temp, or you can create your own library and you can use that name. It's not mandatory. You can use only temp, so you can define your own libraries, a number of libraries wherever you want it. You can save it. But here whatever the library that you used in the data step, the data will be stored in that particular library. So whenever your data set is created, what kind of information that you can see, that details you can see, that we call as a description portion. If you right click it and see the properties, when you right click and see the properties, what are the information that you can capture in SAS system in the backend? So what is mean the first type of it's a table. If it's a window, it's a view or index, it will go like based on that it will go. So this is a default option, it's a view table. It's a location in the work location, it's engine, how many number of rows in this particular table, how many number of columns in that particular table. So when it's created, is there any modification date? Is there a description? So this is a general information about the data set. But about more details here. Out of all these things, you need to check majorly the location where exactly the data set is stored. The data set has been saved. So, but here next one is columns. In the columns have each and every column how it's defined, how it's stored, the table level. So this particular column is defined as a text. The length of this particular column, its maximum length that it's using is 3 characters only. If you are trying to read the data more than 3 characters, it will not be do that. It will take only 3 characters of the data for this particular file. So the length that you specified is a maximum length. So this format and informat. So in the coming classes you will get the details. But now you can just keep it because you need to know that what is meant by format and format. Okay. Similarly, the next one is indexes. Suppose if the table level created any indexes, those details will be shown here. So any constraints, any conditions or any constraint that you are showing here, that will be defined here. So if the data set is password fully, you can also save, means protect the data with the password. So not ever, suppose I don't want to see this data set everybody. So if you want individually, you can just see this. You can put the data. You can put the password for like read, write, and modify. Yeah, so this is a general information. This we called as a description portion of the data. So all these information we can also use in this particular procedure. So because just now we see the properties, because since it's a Windows, you are able to view the data in the properties, right? But if you are on Unix machine, you cannot do like this. So if you do the right click, and it won't get the information. So for that, you need to write the SAS program, one simple lines of statement. Then that all the information about the file will be displayed in the particular log. Okay, so that kind of information that we'll discuss about in coming classes. That is, the procedure is like called as a prop content. Yeah, now creating the data step. Now the next one is a data line cards. So what is mean by data lines and cards? Nothing but it says a data line is a dummy file name that is used to read the values from the program itself. Like what exactly the meaning is. So here, what is happening here? You have the data in the file and reading it and creating the data. But if the data is not in the file, not in the database, simply, but I want to create with a couple of records with a sample, some data. I want to create a data set with a few records. That record I want to enter it in the program. And that we use the data line statement. Data marks. So now that this is a data set that you're creating in the temporarily, and within this data set, what are the columns that you want? So now I'm expecting to create. I'm expecting the data with these columns, like student name, S name, subject, M1, M2, M3, three subject marks. Now the student name you mentioned, right? Normally the student name is like in a character, so you can specify the character. Subject, so it's also character. So if it's a marks mean it's number. For number you don't need to specify anything. Now this is about the column names you define it. Now you are entering the data to because these subject marks and student name, subject and all marks you are giving, you are entering the data, and by entering that you have to create the data set with those records. For that you have to use a data line statement. Now enter the data, what kind of data that you are going to create to the file, like name, a character, subject is okay, person name is John, and subject is maths marks, like this. Similarly, so like this means these are the records that you are entering, and I want to create these records in a dataset format. So now I just entered only two records. Now done. I want to create the dataset with these two records. So then we have to use a semicolon and click run symbol. Click on, just enter the run and click on run. So you can see the marks data that we created with these two records. See, so this we called as a data entry. So when we will be useful means, suppose you have some dates that you want to create it, you want to enter manually or some dates or some kind of information that manually you have to enter it. You have to pass through the program. Then you will use it data line and data line statements. So is it clear the data line statement? So either so you can use the data lines or the card. Both are same meaning. Okay. So this is about the data lines in cards. Okay. So the next one is like using the different delimiters. So we'll discuss about the delimiter part. Now data lines is about the data lines. Yeah, so this follow discuss input buffer program and description portion. That is an example here. The library part also we discussed it. Yeah. So we'll go to this one here. So the next one is like here reading the data, because we discussed about the column input yesterday. So today we are discussing about another input method that we called as a list input. So in the column input yesterday, what we discussed in the column input, the data we are reading in a fixed width file. Like each and every column length is fixed. Like what is starting position, ending position is fixed, right? But in the list input, you're not, the data is not in a fixed format. The data will be varying. How you are going to handle that kind of data? Okay. So the first thing is list input. In the list input, these are the so before reading any kind of data, you have to examine these things. Like you have to do the check before checks on this. You need to have this kind of information are there or not in your when you are reading that file. So in the list input, this is the simplest form of the input file statement. So and in this list input, it's used to read the data values separated by delimiter character. In this particular data, the data is read by separate delimiter. So by default, the delimiter is blank. So with this input style, SAS states the data values until it encounters a blank space or end of the file input record. So if you see here, each and every column is separated by space, right? Each and every column value here. So this is called as a one type of delimiter. So by default, delimiter is space or blank. Okay. So if the data is a space, automatically it will deal the data. Suppose, let's see some example here. Let's see this. So you have the data like this, something like the something name. So when you run this, you see the difference. See, you got the complete name or was part of the name. So it's a part of the name that you can see here. Because why we got only the part of not complete data. So in the yesterday we discussed the default length of each and every character is 8 bytes. So 8 bytes of the data, 8 bytes, 8 characters of the data by default the SAS will read it. So if you define more, so if you want to read more characters, like you have to specify that length here. Suppose if I specify 15 dot, so dot you have to specify the 15. Okay. So if you define the 15, it will take the 15 characters, the remaining 8 characters, it's fine. But what about the next record? Does it have 15 record, 15 characters? No, right? So in these are the different scenarios that you are going to face when you're reading the data in the list input. The by default list input is a space. It's by default it will take 8 characters. If it's more than 8 characters, you have to think, you have to apply the different options, different criteria. So let's go through that. Yeah, this is about the default space delimiter, less than 8 characters. If the data is in a delimiter, like, yes, so I'm coming to that one. So if you want a full name, then you have to use there is a colon modifier. You have to use a colon. So if you specify the colon, the data will read perfectly. Only it's not reading the data. So how many characters that you have? I think we have to use a dot here. So that's the reason always whenever you're trying to read the data, if you don't know the exact length of each and every characters, try to read as much as maximum length. So if here the data is, so when you specify the colon 15 dot, then automatically it will take the 15 characters. If the blank is there, it will go to the next line. It goes to the like this. If more than 8 characters, like this kind of scenarios. Now if the data is in a comma delimiter, let's take the comma. The data as a comma delimiter. So whenever that if you, the data is in a comma delimiter, then how you are going to read the data? Then you have to use a dummy in file statement. In file, you have to use the data lines, and you have to use a delimiter. Either you can use a shortcut as a DLM, or you can type completed delimiter. So what kind of delimiter that you are just using, you have to specify that here. So now try to run it. So even though if you use a space, you are not getting complete name. So you have to again you have to use a length. See, okay, the second line is not coming, so you have to use this colon. Now you can see this. Okay, so if the data is in a like any delimiter kind of data, then you have to use delimiter, and if the length is more than 8 characters, if you define it, you have to use a colon and what is the length that you are expecting. So these are the different scenarios, like how you are going to read the data from the file. Suppose if the same data is in a separate particular file, then you will use, instead of data lines, will use that particular reference of the file. If the data is within the program, then you have to use the same like in data lines. There is not that's the difference. Okay, so this is about the list input and the delimiter. So there are our column inputs so that we discussed yesterday. So 1 to 6 and like this. So whenever you, even though if the specifying the length, you don't need to bother about the colon or nothing, anything. But only it's fixing the length and you're going to use it like this. So these are the definitions. So now reading the data with the required specific instructions. So the next topic is a formatted input. Okay. So here you need to know what exactly the formatted input. Before the formatted input, what exactly mean a format? Right. So what is mean by format? Sas format. Format or Sas format. A format, nothing but it's an instruction that Sas uses to write the data values. If you are using that as a, like, see, because what kind of, how you are going to read, how you are going to write. So if you're using the format, then you're going to write the values. If you're going to use in format, you are going to read the data. So these are the two types of format and informat. So format is majorly used to write the data values. Write the data values means how you want to write this particular value to the what particular format. So I want to, so there is an amount number is there. I want to save, means I want to write this number in a dollar format. I want to write this number is a pound form, in a pounds. I want to write in a comma. I want to write in a two decimals. Like means the number will be converted into this particular format. The value will not change. Only the lookup is change. Look will change. Other than that, everything is good. Means the format is majorly used how you are going to write the value. It means that particular thing your SAS will give the instruction to that particular value, and that value will be written in the particular format. That is about the format. The opposite is informat, means how you are going to read. Suppose if this is a value, I have it with all the dollar format, two decimals, everything is there. Now I want to read that particular format and convert into the number, right? So then we can use the informat. So these are the two differences. So like see the format. So how you are going to use this particular format, the variable name. So if you are reading a dollar means character, W means width, dot, D means decimals. If the particular number you are writing in a two number of decimals, then you use it. If you are writing as a character, then you can use specify like that. So here are a couple of examples. Suppose if you specify 8.2, it means there are two decimal points included in the length of 8 characters. The total width is 8 characters. Out of 8, 2 are decimals. Remaining 6 include one. There is one period sign. It also consider that means then the original number is only 5 characters, 2 decimals and one dot character. So means that will be written like this. So this is about the character. Now let's go to the character. If you specify $5 dot, when you say specify dollar means it accepts only the 5 maximum characters. If more than 5 characters, it will not read the data. It will truncate it. If more than 8 characters also there, it will be not read it. It will take only 5 characters. Next example is comma, W dot D. So comma means the number will be written in the comma format, 10 comma 000 dot 000. Like the number amount will be written in this particular format. Now you can see the difference between the W dot D and comma W dot D. So when you say W dot D, it means there is no commas, there is no sign. But when you specify the comma means the numbers will be converted into commas. And in the left side, every 3 letters, every 3 numbers will be separated by comma. Similar to dollar. So it means the amount, if you want to see the amounts in the dollar format, then you have to use a dollar. What is the width and decimals you want it. So the number will be, so this is a number, this number will be converted into this particular format in the output file if you use the format statement. So is it clear? That depending upon the length that you specified here. So if you specify the, like, see, there are how many characters here? 3, 3, 6, 7, 8. So you want to suppose now you want to see more than 8 characters. If we specify if we increase the 9, it will only see the dollar. If we increase the 10, you can also get the comma. Yeah, we'll see that example that. Now let's go to the formatted input. So whenever you receive the data in the particular form, now you want to read how you are going to use the formatted. See here, January sales input is an item, amount is this one. Let's go to the right example here. See, these amounts are coming or not. You are getting blank in the amount fields. Why means the amount fields you see that there is a comma. So comma is representing majorly for the character data. It means you cannot able to read the data if the particular data has contains comma. So how we can read this kind of data? Then simply you have to use comma. How many characters here? 6 dot. See, now you don't see the comma here because this particular method we called as a format input, and here we are using input format. Means we're reading the data, not writing, right? So we are already the data is in a formatted. We are applying some in format. This we call as in format. So it means that now once after reading the data, that the amount automatically converted into proper number. So I don't want to convert anything. I want to whatever the data, how it like I don't want to convert that into number. Whatever the data that I have received, I want to read as easily. Then simply use $6 dot. So you can read that number as a character data and run it. See. Because if you have lay data like this, you cannot able to multiply, I cannot do any sum, I cannot do any calculations for the character data. So again, you have to convert it. Okay. So this is how we can use a formatted input. So similarly, you can just specify whatever. You can practice more example like dollar amounts. Okay. So this is about that. This output will be like this. So this method we call as a formatted input. It means that the input data that you are receiving in the form of specific format. So whenever you receive the data, you have to apply your own formats and read it and create the data set. Is it clear? Okay. Yeah, this is about format input. So now we can go through the different scenarios, how you are going to read the data. The next one is how you're controlling the position of your data. So controlling the position of the pointer in the format input. Okay. So there is an input, there are three different methods, like two different methods are there, like column input, like absolute column pointer control and relative pointer control. There are two pointer controls are here. So here in this case, what happening is you're reading the data both column input and formatted input. It means you're mixing the data. If the data is there, you're using the both different methods and using in a single data step. It means mixed input, nothing but column input and formatted input, both the methods that you are using here in one particular program. See here the amounts, item item 1 to 16, you are using the fixed input like column input. 1 to 16 nothing but the column input, and amount is a formatted input. So this is called as a column and formatted input. The next one is a list input. Suppose if you define 1 to 16, automatically take the data up to 16 characters. But unnecessarily we are reading all the spaces, right? So I don't want to read the spaces. So from 10th to 16th, I don't want to read anything because it's a blank data that I know that. It means I want to remove those unnecessary characters and I don't want to read it. So item $10. So if you specify the $10, that means it will read only 10 characters, first 10 characters. So when you specify at the rate 17, it means that the data will start reading from 17th position. From 11th to 16th, the data will not read anything. So it means you are ignoring completely on those whatever the data that you have in that particular positions. So this method we call as absolute pointer control. Absolute column pointer controls means you're controlling that particular position. Absolutely you're controlling. So the syntax here means here to control that one we need to use a @ symbol. Okay, and the next one is relative pointer control. It means you are asking to move 6 characters and then start reading the data from that. So in the absolute pointer control, what we are doing is we are exactly specifying which position onwards you want to read it. But here in the relative pointer control, I want to read the data 10 characters and I want to move to 6 characters, and from there you are not then you there from there you have to start reading the next column. It means the @ and moves the pointer to column n and moves the pointer to number of positions. Directly @n will means it directly goes to the particular position, column name, column. But here it moves the n number of positions. So these are the two different techniques that you are, so that you want to unnecessarily avoid some spaces. I don't want to read specific characters. Or one more thing, like let me give you some examples here. Sales ID amount, right? Product name. See, so how many characters that you have this one? So you have 22 characters with 17 characters. So I'm giving 17 dot. See, amounts are nothing. Why nothing? Can you explain me why we got the blank for the amount field? So do you know why we got the amount fields is blank? So because it will read the data up to 17 characters here. From 17th to 6th positions only you are asking to read. From here you are asking to read 6 characters. All the 6 characters are blank. It started again 28th position. From 17th to 28th nothing is there. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to ask him to move 10 characters. So directly I want to read data from 28th position onwards. Right? So it means from 17th to 28th, whatever the data is there, I don't want, I just ignore it. So this is a one scenario. Now I'm removing all the things and keeping only one space. Okay, now I want to take the data from this particular position. From 10th position, I want to read 16 characters. See, whatever whatever the number of characters you read completely, but in the second column, I want to go back to that particular position and start reading data from that particular position to 16 characters. So it means you're also taking the first column data part from the first column, the part of the data you're taking and reading it here. So this is also this is also one of the good examples. Like means you can move the number of characters front and you can move the number of characters back. It means whenever you use the at the red symbol means you are asking from which position you are asking to read the data. Okay. So similarly, if you specify like -6, let's see. It's not working. So this is only positive. You have to give. You're asking to move only plus symbol only you have to use. So from 17 you have to move 6 characters. From there you have to read 16 characters. Okay. So the absolute pointer control it's very useful. So to retrieve the some already existing reading the data file, but for this particular relative pointer control, it asking to move special number of characters. So this is about the pointer controls like absolute and relative. Yeah. And additional example. So if you want to read the data, so creating the longer variables and reading the specific numeric data that contains the special characters by using the colon modifier. If the data contains any embedded values, then you have to use and symbol, and you can also use mix list column in formatted input. All the different methods you can use it here. Yeah, so these are the different methods like list input, column input, formatted input, absolute pointer control, area pointer control, right? For all the these things we discussed. Now the next one is so till now any questions? Okay, good. The next one is reading the delimiter raw data files. So this is another example here. I'm not using anything here. So delimiter. You can see here. So there is a message saying that invalid data. Now you remember that. So we now you have to recollect with the input buffer here. See, each 1, 4, 5, 10 characters missed one like this 90. See, first student name we are taking 15 characters. It's good. Next subject is taking 8 characters. Maths good. But M1 12, M3 23 good. But M3 is missing. It means you have missing data at the end of the row. See, if the data is missing, the completely file is, you see, there are only 3 records that's created. Not here. In the marks, see. It's gone. There is no fourth. This particular record is not coming. It means it's completely. What will happen is if the data is missing, it will be like this. Since it's a character, you got the blank. So this is how the SAS will consider that will read the data. To read this in missing data also, you have to use one option in the infile statement. If you specify the missover option, if any value is missing at the end of the row, end of the record, that will be considered as a missing and will read the data properly. You can see here. So this is the option majorly used. Even though suppose this is a small small record that you are entering and creating, practicing. But if you receive the very huge file, right? You are going to specify the file and reading the data, but you never know that if the end of the row is missing or not. Because if it's only 4 or 5 columns, maybe you can identify it. But if it's a number of columns are around 30, 40, the last column you may never know. We never understand. Like you never know that the particular column is missing or value is there or not. So always you have to put the miss over in whenever you are using the infile statement. Even though if there is no missing, doesn't matter. Always use the miss over in all the infile statements every time whenever you're reading the data, because you never know that the data is missing at the last. Okay, so this particular option is very powerful compared to whenever you're reading the data from the file. So this is about the missing. And missing values with the placeholders means whenever the data is missing in between like this, then we have to use a DSD. So whenever you use the DSD means it will be only useful if the data is a comma delimiter. If the data is a delimiter, if the delimiter is a comma, then only you have to use the DSD. But if the data is missing in between that, you have to use a colon. You have to colon operator, and if the data is missing in between, okay. And if the end of the day missing, you have to use DSD. So delimiter DSD, missing data are represented by the conjugated delimiters and are embedded where we can use a DSD. Okay, yeah. So any questions? We'll move to the next topic. Okay. So the next one is reading the raw data file with multiple records for observations. Reading the raw data file with a mixed record type. Subset from the raw data file. Read the raw data file with the multiple observations per record. See, So these are the different scenarios, right? You may receive the data in the different format. Like these are the different formats. So till now we discussed about the column input, formatted input, list input, and some with absolute pointer control, relative pointer control, colon modifier, embedded blanks. Like, but now what about these scenarios? Like if you receive the raw data file with the multiple observations, multiple records, but that particular records is representing only one particular column, one particular row. The perfect example for this is address information. So whenever you're writing the address, you will write in a multiple columns, like first name, last name, address line 1, address line 2, city, state, and pin code. Like, right? So like this, you will write all the different things. But all these represents in one particular record. But because whenever you're writing the paper, whenever writing in the file, you will have like that. But whenever you're creating the data set, you need to have in a single column, single row. So how you're going to read those type of data? That is one scenario. And the next scenario is if the raw data file contains mixed record types, nothing but one date. Let's take some example date. So the date value has a different types. Like if the data is in whenever you receive the data from the UK, so it will start for the first month. So sorry, first date you will receive it. But when it come to the US, it will write that the data will be in the first month. It means the data is variation. One particular data, we have two different values, and how you are going to read those type of scenarios. Okay, and subset of the raw data file. So you want to create subset some raw data file. And the last one is that multiple observations per record. It means like in one particular record, you have seen multiple observations. Means multiple records are kept in one particular line, one record only. Then how you are going to divide that particular lines into multiple records? Okay, so these are the different scenarios. So all these things that we're discussing is how you are going to create the data set from the different type of files. Okay, so what we are discussing is now how to create the data set that from when you receive the file with the different scenarios. Okay, so I'll stop here and we'll continue these 4 topics tomorrow. And means tomorrow means the next class, whenever it may be next class. So I'll take with the examples because I need to go to the examples and then I explain you that. So okay. So any questions, anything you want to know that? Okay. So what I'll do is I'll send these recordings along with that some material, what are the topics that we covered, what are the material that I shown here, all those things we'll send it to. Yeah, you will get all these things by maybe tomorrow. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So we'll meet tomorrow. We'll meet next class, maybe next Monday. Right. So yeah, we'll meet on next Monday. Thank you. Thanks everyone.